Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This webinar is brought to you by Strategies 2.0, a statewide collaborative funded by the California Office of Child Abuse Prevention. Today's webinar is Breaking Free, Surviving Addiction, and I'm really excited about today's webinar. My name is Carrie Collins, and I will be your facilitator today. The webinar is scheduled from 10 until 11:30, and that time is going to go very quickly. So we hope that you will stay with us the entire time. My role today is to introduce the topic and the presenters to you, keep track of time, and help the presenters and all of you participants in any way that I can. So in a moment, I will introduce our two presenters to you, but I'd like to kind of go over some of the go-to tricks that we have. So all of you should see on your screen that you have a little red arrow that controls your toolbar. You can either have that open or shut. You can join us today by telephone. If you join us by telephone, it's very important that you enter the access code and the PIN number. Or if you want to ask a question live, I would not be able to unmute you. If you join us by your computer speakers, sometimes the sound can be a little warbly, but don't worry about that. That just kind of goes in and out very quickly. We are going to invite you to use the chat box today. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to ask our presenters, please use the chat box to do that. My colleague Alma Tovar will be monitoring the chat box today. We are going to hold the questions until the end of the webinar. So just hold on. We promise that all of your questions will be answered. If you want to ask the question live yourself, you just click on that little raised hand and I would be able to unmute you and you would be able to address your questions directly to Troy or to Katherine today. I have muted all of you, so you don't need to worry about, except for the speakers and for myself and Alma, all of you are muted. So you don't need to worry if you have any background noise going on. We will not be able to hear that. I hope all of you are safe somewhere and keeping your social distancing of at least 6 feet between you and the person next to you. So with that, it's just really my honor to introduce our speakers to you today. Troy Nichols is my colleague, but also my very good friend. He is a Strategies 2.0 senior trainer and consulting specialist at the Child Abuse Prevention Center in Sacramento. Troy is a graduate of James Madison University, where he received his Bachelor of Science degree in psychology. He has worked in the child welfare field for over 20 years. I know he doesn't look like he's over 16, but he's been doing this for over 20 years, doing technical assistance, coaching, and training in the areas of organizational sustainability, integrated services, leadership, collaboration, community impact, youth engagement, policy implementation and adherence, and child and client-focused practices. In Troy's previous position, he provided foundational education and development to at-risk children, youth, and families, specifically in minority communities and urban settings. Troy will be presenting in just a moment. I will turn it over to him, and he will be talking about the Opioid Toolkit that was developed by Strategies 2.0. Katherine Inman is my new friend and family member over the last few months that we have been talking. She is an amazing individual, and you are going to really enjoy her presentation today. For over 30 years, she worked as the operations director for the Center for Human Services, a nonprofit community services organization. She is now semi-retired and is in the publication process for her debut book, Delivered, a nonfiction transformational memoir and story of her family's journey through addiction. She currently provides coaching and consultation services, as well as pursuing her passion job as an author. We're so grateful that she is here with us today, that she is willing to share this beautiful personal story about her family's journey, and I know you're just going to enjoy this so much. So with that, I am going to turn this over to my colleague Troy, and he is going to take over as the presenter.
Good morning. Again, my name is Troy Nichols, and I just want to express the sincere appreciation when Carrie asked me to do this. I was working with a group, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on a opioid toolkit, essentially just trying to provide some resources, information, training opportunities, and various things to an epidemic, a situation that we certainly have throughout our state and our country. And so I was very excited about it. And then my excitement went through the roof once I met Katherine and how she goes about telling her story. And I think it's a wonderful addition to the work that we have done around our opioid toolkit. So one of my responsibilities is doing consulting work. And at the beginning of Strategies 2.0's contract, one of the things that the Office of Child Abuse Prevention does is they provide funding to various agencies or groups to accomplish different things within our field. And one of the things they asked us to do was to help to consult with those groups or those agencies to move the needle, to move things along. The particular group that I was assigned to was the Sierra Sacramento Child Abuse Prevention Council group. And one of the things that they had received from the Office of Child Abuse Prevention was what was called an Innovative Partnership Grant. And the hope was to provide funding to various groups that were collaborating and doing various things within our field, within our community, and strengthen families and, again, move the needle. So with that, one of the responsibilities of this Innovative Partnership Grant, again, through the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, was to develop a regional collaborative to coordinate child abuse and neglect prevention efforts. One of the things that this group does that's a big part of it is a huge education push during the Child Abuse Prevention Month. So we provide funding to the 14 agencies that we work with, or 14 counties that are represented. So that's one of the large things. The next thing was this opioid toolkit. And the group works actively with the Office of Child Abuse Prevention to identify organizations to assess CAPCs or the Child Abuse Prevention Centers in this areas, their strengths and their needs. The push was to develop a regional collaborative. Now, what was great in this situation is it had already been established at one point, so we were reestablishing and developing and strengthening what we were going to provide. So one of the responsibilities of this group that was written into the contract was a goal for an opioid toolkit. So OCAP had goal number 3. And what that looked like was this. Was to produce a toolkit to promote community engagement around the prevention of alcohol and other drugs / substance abuse as it relates to child abuse prevention. So the group began to think about how this would look and how do we begin to develop this process. We realized that there were a lot of resources out here, even within those 14 counties, as well as throughout the state, that could be utilized with regards to putting together some sort of toolkit to assist in this work. So what we did is we started with kids' data. And I don't know how purposeful it was, but it began the dialogue about various things that could be a part of the toolkit. And what came out of kids' data were various data points that were put together. First, you'll see on this list that the counties that were represented, the 14 counties are represented there, and then the risk factors that the group chose to look at with regards to how we begin to focus our efforts. So the 4 areas were poverty, history of abuse and neglect, mental illness, and then substance abuse. A great part of this were charts were created, and I'm sorry for scrolling through them so quickly, but I just want to move to the substance abuse chart. So these charts were given to us, and we began to look at them, and in all actuality, the Opioid Toolkit wasn't necessarily being thought of at this point, but it began to generate some conversation around it and looking at some of these statistics and looking at some of the needs within our county. So the next thing was the agency's responsibilities. How do we go about doing this? And what we did was, out of those 14 counties, we identified 8 agencies, and we began to identify a contact person. We had certain parameters that we wanted to be followed in order to begin to look at this toolkit. Some of these we were able to accomplish, others we weren't, but we were able to move through this process and come out with a final product. We are still in the process of evaluating, and I am going to ask the group once we get into the website in just a moment, if they do touch this document, if they could also go in and do our evaluation. So this was a big part of putting this together, as well as figuring out how to use it and how successful it is. So with that, let's take a look at the toolkit. So first, I'd like to direct you to the Child Abuse Prevention Center website. You can see up here in the toolbar, thecapcenter.org, thecapcenter.org is the website. When you go into the website, you'll go to what we do, and then down to Innovative Partnership Opioid Toolkit, and it'll bring you to this screen. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to put these into various categories, and the categories that were developed were articles and references, promotional and educational materials, evidence-based curriculums, data portals, available training, roadmap for coalition building, and important links. And the conversation that went into this with the various partners that we work with was, what do we need? How do we go about putting this in a place that's accessible? How do we go about maintaining it and developing it? So I'd just like to show you a few pieces of it. If you click on each of these, it'll take you to a different aspect of the toolkit. One of the most important to me and is used quite a bit is the promotional and educational materials. A lot of work was done to begin to scour throughout what's already being done so that we would not reinvent the wheel. So as you see here, we have some information from YoloCountyKids.org. Again, some information about self-care. What I like is we also began to put information in here about statistics and talking about opioid medication, a risk for children and teens. Now, this website is the Children's Safety Network. Great part about it is we were able to connect with these various websites that update themselves. So in this particular one, they provide you with infographics and information that could really assist in various places, not only providing education to our community, developing policies and procedures, as well as grant writing and meeting the needs of grants. One other place are our available trainings. We have strategies listed here, as well as some other county-specific training that will begin to, can be developed. And if anyone is aware, we're always willing to put things onto this site. Our data portals, things that we use to actually develop this, but also to continue in our process, our kids data, California Child Welfare Indicators, America Fact Finder, ACEs Connections, and California Opioid Overdose Surveillance Dashboard. So this was a really big undertaking, and to have it come to fruition and then begin to hear from people with regards to how it's being used is really, really important to us. So before I turn this over to Katherine, we would like this document to grow, and we'd like to know how it's being used. Oftentimes, when we're in the trenches and doing the work, sometimes we need something just to to motivate us or to jog our memory or to give us some creative ways to think about it. And we think this opioid toolkit will do that. So I encourage each of you to touch it, to tell a friend, to tell a colleague, to tell a coworker to touch it. And then I'll ask that you take this survey. The survey will allow us to begin to see, again, how it's being used. Is this something that we would look to expand or have people duplicate? So what we're asking is that you take this short survey, let us know how it's being used, and stay in contact. So with that, I'll turn it back to Carrie, and I definitely appreciate your attention.
Thank you so much, Troy. That's just really, really informative to all of our partners out there, all of you that are boots to the ground on a daily basis working with families and children. We hope that this toolkit will give you some extra really necessary resources that you can utilize. So at this point, and if you have any questions or comments for Troy, he's going to stay with us the whole webinar, so he'll answer those at the end. So don't hesitate to put that in there. Right now, I'm going to turn this over to Katherine and make her our new presenter.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see your slide. We are good to go.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm on the screen in the PowerPoint, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Aloha, everybody. I'm so honored to be here this morning. And, Carrie, I want to thank you. I love that we're already friends, and I appreciate the time that you take to put this webinar together. Really appreciate it. Troy, thank you so much as well. Such a pleasure getting to know you. Great information that you're sharing this morning. And I love the toolkit. I did not know that was available until recently, so that's amazing. I also want to recognize Strategies 2.0 and the Office of Child Abuse Prevention for the good work that you do and for allowing things like this to be available to people. I just think it's amazing. So much respect to you. And finally, I just want to say thank you to the listeners. I know that your time is valuable, and I love that you are spending or chose to spend your time with me this morning. So I appreciate you. Let's get right to it. Okay. So welcome. Here's our agenda today. What we're going to talk about is I'm going to just go through my background briefly. I'm going to tell you about our story. We're going to touch on the stigma of addiction, go over perspectives, support resources, and then at the ending we'll have closing and questions. Also, there'll be 3 polls throughout, so it will be interactive. Super excited about that to get some information from you guys. And my hope today, my hope and prayer is that getting a glimpse inside the story of a family that has walked through the fire of addiction is going to help you, whether you are personally or professionally sitting across from people like us, families that are going through this, that this information might help you to understand what they're going through a little bit better. And also, I hope that something is of value, that today you learn something that you can take and apply right away. The whole intention, the whole reason I'm here is to support people, send a message of hope, and yeah, so that's the takeaways. Before we jump in, I'd like to start with a poll. So I can know who's here. So Carrie, can we do the first poll?
Yes, hold on just a second. So I'm going to launch a polling question for you. Hopefully you can all see that. What types of services do you provide? So just select one: behavioral health, prevention, intervention, education, recreation, or other. And we will wait while people are voting.
Okay.
So go ahead and click right onto the slide itself. You should be able to click right onto the slide to do your vote. So I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. All right. And I'm going to share the results. So we have 4% that are in behavioral health, 46% that are in prevention intervention, 19% in education, nobody in recreation, and 31% that are in other.
Okay.
So I'll hide that, and that should go back. There you go.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We're ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk just a little bit about my background and why I'm here with you this morning. When Carrie first called me to inquire about doing this webinar, I believe she was of the understanding that I was a trained facilitator on the subject matter. I also think that she believed I had done webinars before, and neither of those things are true. I am an experienced trainer, but this is the first time that I have ever told our story. So when Carrie learned that I was not an experienced trainer, she still listened to me, and ultimately she decided that I was bringing something of value. And I love that she decided that, because I do believe there's so much that we can learn from just people's life experiences, the trauma and the suffering they go through and how they walked through that. And I feel like Carrie, I just thank you again for taking a chance on me. I just am so honored to be here. So what qualifies me to be in front of you today and giving this webinar is one thing. I survived my son's addiction. I did not think I would, but I did, and so did he. And so today what I'm going to do is share our story with you. So a little bit about me again. My name is Katherine Inman. I am a believer. I am a woman of faith, and you're going to hear that throughout the story today, respectfully. I'm also a resident of both. I'm from the Bay Area originally, but I'm a resident of Modesto, California, and Kona, Hawaii. I'm coming to you actually from Kona, so we have 3-hour time difference, so it's still a little bit dark here. Anyway, I am married. It's our second marriage for both my husband and I. We're a blended family. Between the two of us, we have 5 kids, amazing children, and I have 2 biological sons. In terms of my nonprofit experience, as Carrie had said, I worked for a nonprofit, Center for Human Services, for over 30 years. There we provided prevention, education, intervention, shelter, and treatment services to individuals and families. In my role as operations director, I was responsible for operations. I oversaw the business aspect of it. So I was in charge of human resources, IT, technology, and administration. So in my role, I handled all the legal matters. I did the recruiting, hiring, firing, investigations, anything, any kind of legal matters. I worked a lot with the culture that we had at the organization, and I also did policy development and implementation. So I am what you would call an all-in person. When I'm passionate about something, I just dive in, and I was passionate about the work that we did at the center. Also, I'm a good problem solver. When faced with issues and given some time, there's not a lot I couldn't figure out, both in my professional life, in my career at the center, and also personally. That has always been a strength for me, is I can navigate through whatever situation's in front of me, and that has worked for me a good part of my life. So you would say in both my personal life and professional life, I am a go-getter. I can handle things. The mission at the center, I also have a heart for the broken. So I love to be part of an organization that helped people be better. The mission at the organization, at Center for Human Service, is to change lives and build futures through programs that strengthen and support youth and families. And the staff there do an amazing job at that. So shout out to Center for Human Services. So in June of 2018, I resigned my position and I came to join my husband, who actually got a job at a coffee company here in Kona, Hawaii. And that is why I'm coming to you from Hawaii. That's how I landed in this beautiful place. I am semi-retired. It's lovely here. I'm drinking Kona coffee as I'm sitting here with you today. So I have adjusted pretty well to the new environment. So that's enough about me. And before we really dive into the meat of the story, I'd like to do another poll if we could, Carrie. I am interested to hear how often you guys refer families to resources related to addiction. So we've got 3 choices there.
All right, let me launch that.
Okay.
And go ahead and click right on the poll. So your answers are never, once in a while, or frequently. How often do you refer families to resources related to addiction? We've got almost half of you that have voted, so keep voting. And I will close this poll in about 5 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to close and share the results. So we have 15% that have never referred families, 62% once in a while, and 23% frequently.
Okay. Excellent. Good to know. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to jump into our story. I told you I have 2 biological sons. This is a picture of them when they were younger. It was summertime. They never wore shirts. I don't know why. Justin, the one that we're going to talk the most about today, is in the middle with a big grin. To the right of him is his brother, my other son, Dylan. They're 3 years apart. To the left is a friend, Robert. I threw him in the picture. Anyway, so I am aware of the struggles that families are facing. Poverty, mental health, substance abuse. I strongly believe in prevention, education, and of course, community. I grew up around a lot of addiction in my life and alcoholism. I am not naive. I moved out when I was 16 years old, and I have seen some things in my life. With my background, both in my personal background, growing up and being independent at such a young age, and also in the work that I did at the center, you can make some assumptions about me. And one may speculate that I would be equipped or more equipped than the average person to deal with some of the struggles that might hit my family. But let me tell you, when addiction hit my family and our youngest son, Justin, all that knowledge, wisdom, life experience, it just went away. I was not ready for it. It hit me out of nowhere, and I felt like I had to handle it alone. So that's exactly what I did. So these are my boys. That's me in the middle, and that is Justin to the right, Dylan to the left, my bookends. This was taken, I think they were both in high school. So they're a little bit about us. We are white, middle-class family. Their father and I divorced when the boys were young, so they're about 3 and 6 years old. So I was a single mom. Their father was in their lives, but I was, the majority of their time was spent with me. And we had a lot of support. We had a lot of friends and family around us. And before we went into what I refer to as the dark times in Justin's addiction, these 2 guys, they were amazing. Well-mannered young men. They were contenders in athletics, competitive, energetic, intense. They had decent grades. They absolutely loved the social and athletic aspect of school more than the academics, but they're smart young men. Responsible, good boys. I was very proud of them. I provided for them. All their needs were met. We were not wealthy by any means, but our home was clean. It was full of food. It was always humming with laughter, good music. We were happy. I showed up for every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every open house, all the important events that happened in their life from the time they were born until, well, it still is that way for forever. They were never worried if I was going to be there or show up. They were not worried if if there's going to be food on the table when they got home from school. We had a predictable life in a good way. It was structured. We were happy. We were thriving. Life was good. We were a team. We just worked together on everything. So I would say we were very, very close. throw it back a little bit. This is Justin. This is my spunky, sweet little boy. He was little in this. I don't know how old he was, maybe 5 or 6. The two things that people noticed about my son were his beautiful big brown eyes, and the other was his spirit. He just was a ball of fire. He was always happy and smiling and just hungry for life. Even when he was a toddler, he did not like to take naps because he was scared he was going to miss something. So he had this already kind of an extreme personality and intense, and he was just an absolute delight. Everybody loved Justin. He was always happy. Fast forward a little bit into high school. This is Justin. This is definitely when the nightmare started. This picture is one of his senior pictures. So meet Justin. He, in high school, he was an amazing athlete. It came naturally to him. He was a quarterback for the football team, the catcher for the baseball team. The girls absolutely loved him. He was popular. He had a lot of friends, but he also had enemies. People tend to either love him or hate him, and he seemed to thrive on both. Justin was intense. He was a risk taker. He didn't really have fear, and he really thrived on attention. And he had a temper. He got in a lot of fights. I remember even at a young age, 10, 11 years old, he would get in fights, and I was so confused by that. But Justin had this definite sense of right and wrong, and if he was wronged, he wouldn't take it without a fight. So he was intense. His grades were okay. Again, he wasn't super interested in the academic part of high school, but he was doing fine. And again, I want to say I'm not naive. What I didn't know at this time in his life, Justin had already tried alcohol, tobacco, marijuana. He had dabbled in his hallucinogens, so ecstasy, mushrooms, and then prescription medications like Xanax and Adderall. He had tried those things. He was a party boy. I did not know that, but he kept it under control. I was a hands-on mom. So he had curfews, he was held accountable. I called, I checked on him. He was a handful, so I made sure that I was checking to see what he was going. And again, I had no idea that this was going on with him. And let me tell you, in high school, these kids passed around pharmaceutical pills, drugs, like they were candy. Once I found that out, I was just shocked by it. A lot of people were partying, and that's when Justin tried opiates. He didn't try the opiates because he got injured and he got the prescription from doctor. No, he tried them because Justin liked to get high. He loved the feeling of being impaired, and when he tried opiates, it was different. Nothing else had gripped him, but the opiates did. So he started chasing it. He described that time as like he was loving life. He was happy. He was thriving. He was excited about his future. He hoped to go to college and play football, and he felt like the opiates just made everything better. Even his skills and his personality, he felt like the opiates just made him better. So he chased it, and it gripped him. It did. So at this point, he still looked good. He was still functioning. Things were getting a little chaotic for him, but he was living large and he was happy. And then his world came crashing down. One of his good friends committed suicide, and that, of course, that shattered his heart. It shattered all our hearts. We were devastated. We did not understand. At that point in our life, we were believers. We would have said that we believed in the Lord, but we were not walking with Jesus. We did not have that foundation to fall on. So when that happened, Justin was confused and he was broken, but he continued on. He didn't have answers, but he continued on. Then within less than 2 weeks of that, what he thought was the most important game of his football career, homecoming, he got expelled from high school. This was not anything to do with drugs. It was something very random. But this next game, there was potentially scouts there that were looking at him for for college. So when he got expelled, his whole world came crashing down. He was isolated. He was alone. Justin never liked being alone, and he was depressed. At this point, his older brother, my oldest son Dylan, he was chasing his dream. He was in college playing baseball. So he was out of the house. I was at work trying to provide for the family. So Justin was home alone, and he did what he always did to feel better, is he got high. So he started using more. He was still getting in fights, but they were intense. There was a difference because he was in a very, very dark place. Eventually he did, by the grace of God, he graduated high school in independent study. So we got through that. He was uncertain what his future was going to bring. So he got a job at a grocery store. And the pills were expensive, harder to get his hands on. And so one day a coworker told him, look, bro, I have something that is a lot cheaper and a lot stronger, and you're going to love it. And that is when my beautiful boy, this is emotional, my beloved youngest son first tried heroin. He tried the heroin. He describes that experience as euphoric. All his problems floated away. The pain in his heart was gone. He didn't care anymore. He was numb. He said it felt so good. He felt like he'd finally found what he needed to be happy. So that next morning he woke up and it's all he could think about. So he got more. And the next day he got more heroin. And the next day he got more, and the next day, and the next day, and then everything changed. Everything got out of control. His behavior changed drastically. His appearance changed drastically. He began lying. There was this chaos that was in our lives, and before I could even catch my breath, life as we knew it, that calmness, the happiness, the sense of safety in our home, it went away. It just disappeared in my son's addiction. So let me tell you what the next little bit looked like for us. When I finally figured out what was going on, and things were pretty bad. He was stealing, he was lying, it was just getting out of control, and so I kicked him out. I could not handle the chaos. He was 18 at that point, so I kicked him out. And he left, and he went and he spent the night at a shelter. And he came back the next day ready to get help, and he was rattled. Justin was crying. I could see in his face that first of all, he wasn't high. And the other piece was that I think he was shocked at how quickly he had gone from living a beautiful life to someone that he didn't even recognize, and he was scared. So we explored that, and that didn't work. So the next few years, what it looked like, there was 5 detox days, because coming off of heroin and the withdrawals of heroin are terrible and scary. So he would go to detox. He went into different programs. There was 5 different programs. He had some clean time. He had relapses. It was just this back and forth kind of chaos. And then he went into a program, and he had about 1.5 years clean. So I was encouraged. I felt like, okay, that's behind us. We're ready to go. So he was allowed to come back to our home temporarily till he could get on his feet again. And it wasn't too long that he relapsed again, and this was the worst relapse of all. So this time I kicked him out, but I changed the locks. I recognized then that my fight in Justin's battle was over. I had done everything in my power to help my son, and he kept going back to the drugs. So I had to say, look, I love you, but I will not have your chaos in my home. And so I kicked him out. Like I said, I changed the locks. That he was surprised by that, but I was done. And then things were already bad, but they continued to get worse after that. That is when Justin experienced homelessness. All his relationships started to fall apart. They were shattered. He was stealing from everybody. He was starting to get engaged in some criminal activity as well. So at one point, he had his friends or former friends looking for him because he had ripped people off. He had police officers looking for him because he was getting into criminal activity and he was homeless, and he had detectives looking for him. So he recognized there was nothing left for him in our hometown, so he decided to head, our hometown was in Modesto, California. He decided to head north about a little over an hour and 10 minutes to the Bay Area where I grew up. And he landed in Oakland, California, which is a wonderful city, but where he landed was a drug-infested neighborhood that I would not drive in. I mean, I did drive there one time, and that was the last time. It was a really scary, scary, dark place. And that became his home. This next clip, my friends, it's the first time when I was putting this PowerPoint together, it was the first time my husband had ever seen this. It is a mugshot of my son, and it's hard to look at. Here we go. It still gets to me. This is one of Justin's mugshots. This is the lost, addicted, and broken Justin. At this point, this is where we were in his life. There had been at least 15 arrests. He was wanted in 4 different counties for probation violations. He was thin and gray and hollow looking. He went from Justin's average weight in high school and shortly after was about 190 pounds, and he was buffed, he was in shape, he worked out all the time. Here in this picture, he's about 160 pounds of atrophy. He was literally skin and bones. So this is what Justin's life looked like then. He shot meth during the night because you did not sleep where he was. And then he shot heroin during the day. He was jumped, shot at, he got in fights, and he hustled every day. And when I say hustle, what that meant for him is he would go to a variety of stores. He had a route that he took, and he covered hundreds of miles on foot. And he would steal merchandise throughout the day. Then he would take that merchandise to his contact and sell it to them. They would resell the merchandise at the flea market. So Justin would get his cash. And at that point in time, his habit was around $100 a day. And he would make anywhere between $100 and $300 a day from all the things that he stole. And even if he was getting dope sick or running low on dope, he had to hustle because that's the only way he could get his dope. He was in it, and he was good at it. There was nothing recognizable about my son at this point. He had community that he belonged to. The police knew who he was. The guys on the corner knew who he was. The drug dealers knew who he was. He was comfortable in jail. He would get arrested every 3 weeks or so, and it became routine. During this time, he would go days without eating. And when he did eat, it was usually ice cream. He would go days without drinking anything, not even water. He would urinate maybe once a day, and he would have bowel movements every 2 to 3 weeks. It was as if his body was just not completely shutting down, but he was not functioning. He OD'd on the street many times and would wake up to a different day. He was lost. He was not my son anymore. It still is upsetting. Let me tell you, my friends, you can absolutely hate someone you love. And I hated Justin with everything in me. And what I recognize now is what I hated was the addiction. I loved my son. I would do anything for him. I used to pray that the addiction would leave his body and come into mine. And that may sound heroic, but it wasn't at all. If it was in my body, I could control it. And also, there was nothing worse than watching my child that I love destroy himself. It was the worst thing I've ever witnessed. And let me remind you of my history at Center for Human Services, even in my personal life. And I know how to logically guide people through this kind of trauma. You connect them to resources, right? You set them up, you get them counseling, you plug them in. But I didn't do that. I didn't do any of those things. I kept it all inside. I did not share this story with anyone. Sure, people in my immediate family knew, but they didn't even know where Justin was. And my work family, these are people that I love and see every day, they didn't know. I was not eating, I was thin, I certainly wasn't sleeping. I felt like I was just in a constant state of anxiety because I was waiting to get the call that my son was dead. I knew he could not keep this up very long. So I was waiting to get the call that he was gone, and it was a dark place. I was suffering at the time. I did not know it. I was trying to just white knuckle my way through this, trying to be brave, trying to negotiate this like I had everything else in my life, but that did not work. It didn't work. And then, by the grace of God, and I say that with full intention because God rescued us in my brokenness. He rescued me. He rescued Justin. He rescued Dylan. He rescued my family. So we did survive. We got through this. Okay. Ooh, let's move on from this. I hate this picture. Okay, anyway, let's go. Let's talk some about the stigma of addiction. I love this poem. Judge tenderly if you must. There's usually a side you have not seen, a story you have not heard, a story you know nothing about, and a battle waged that you are not having to fight, by Tracy LaRussa. I also wanted to put this up here that guilt tells us that we've done something bad, but shame tells us that we are bad. And shame is a terrible thing. So I want to tell you guys, there is no profile of an addict. Sure, there may be people that are pre-exposed to it, maybe where they live, or if there's addiction that's already in their family. But addiction looks like me and you. It looks like your neighbors. It looks like the people you're sitting next to right now. My kid was happy, he was thriving, he was loved, and then all of a sudden, as if overnight, he became the guy in your neighborhood that you call the police on, the one that you do not want to come into your house. The young people that I know that have struggled in addiction, since this walk with Justin, I have connected with other people. And these are children of police officers, of attorneys, of doctors, of janitors. These are people that are all different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, socioeconomic classes. They're educated, they're uneducated, employed and unemployed. So please do not make assumptions about what addicts look like, because they look like me and you. There are families, there are loved ones, there are neighbors, there are friends. Let's take a poll so I can take a breath. This is intense. Okay, so this question I'm really excited about to hear if you have experienced or been exposed to addiction. So there's 5 options there for you.
So on this particular question, you can select more than one answer. So I have experienced or been exposed to addiction personally or in my immediate family, with my friends, in my work. I have no direct exposure or experience, or E, decline to answer. So go ahead and answer that question. We know that this might be really personal for a lot of people, so we respect your right to decline to answer if that's what you choose.
Absolutely.
So we have about 66% that have voted so far. I'm going to keep this open for just a little bit longer.
Okay.
About 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close this poll and share the response. So we have 67% of our listeners today have experienced this personally in their immediate family.
Wow.
43% with friends, 40% in their work.
Wow.
17% have had no direct exposure or experience. And nobody declined to answer this or selected that as an answer.
That's amazing.
So thank you so much. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And was it 17% on number 4?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Which obviously is low comparatively, but I'm almost surprised that it's even 17%. So, wow, I'm so glad that we asked that question, and thank you so much for participating. That's data for me, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprised by it, but thank you. Okay, moving on. So why is addiction so hard to talk about? You know, and this, again, everything today is my personal story and an experience. And I have, since this journey, I've talked with a lot of other people. But it's because the shame, you guys, it is so hard to talk about. And so if you think about the behaviors that go with addiction, stealing, lying, can't hold a job or school, it's these, when you're in addiction, and I recognize that there's different levels of this. There are people that are in addiction that function for a while fine. And then there's people like my son who just go from fine to completely spiraling out of control. So I know there's different levels of that. But there is a chaos that comes into the life when someone is actively using. So that chaos is affecting all the relationships in that home. And the isolation, yes, I isolated myself. I didn't talk to anyone because, you know what? I could not even say the words out loud. I couldn't accept it. I refused to have it happening, but yet it was. I couldn't help it. But there was a part of me that would look at my son and I'm like, how did we get here? So I isolated. I couldn't even face it myself. How was I ever supposed to talk to somebody else about it? So it was a huge mistake on my part. I have since learned so much, but I think I know I'm not the only one that isolates. A lot of people do. And the despair, I felt a level of despair and misery that I have never felt before. And I have I buried a brother, I buried both my parents. I mean, I've been through some things, but this despair was heavy, it was thick, it was suffocating, and it was covering me like a blanket, like a blanket on a hot summer day that it just doesn't go away. So that's why, in my opinion, addiction is so hard to talk about, because all the emotions that go with it and the feelings around the shame and the guilt and the turmoil that comes with it. So let's talk about perspective. So Justin and I have, throughout this, preparing for this PowerPoint and speaking with you today, my son and I had a lot of conversations. And one thing is sure or certain is that both my sons, my sister, a lot of people in my family, we are forever changed. We are forever changed by this experience. And I would tell you that I've always been an open person. I mean, we had addiction in my immediate family, so I have always been fairly accepting. But let me tell you, you walk through addiction with your child or someone that you love, and it is so humbling. So I would say that I do not judge people for the most part anymore. Yes. So what do I see? You know, when I see people on the street, when I see people that don't have homes, people that are obviously in desperate need or in broken, I'm not annoyed by that. I'm not frustrated by that in terms of how it affects me. But I see my child. When I see a homeless person, I see Justin. I see sons and daughters and brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, parents. I see grandparents even. I mean, these are people that are broken. These are people that are out there, whether it's mental illness or addiction or whatever brings them to the street. I see them. The Lord has given me a different lens, and I see them through or with different eyes. And what I hear, so part of my struggle, you know, I'm working and I'm going through life, and people do not know what's going on with my child. So while he's homeless on the street as a criminal, people don't know. I'm sure everybody recognized something was going on with me, but they didn't know what was going on specifically. And I would hear things like comments like, nobody comes back from addiction, or once you try meth, your brain is fried and you're not coming back from that. And it would just wreck me, because it is not true. There is no one beyond hope. There is no one so far gone that they can't come back from it. I recognize that now, and I also recognize that people are well-intentioned, but those kinds of statements, like, I needed hope. I needed to believe he was going to come back from this. And he did, and people do. There's where there's breath. I'm getting excited, sorry. Where there is breath, there is hope. One of my warrior sisters, Rosemary, says that all the time, and it's true. So we can't be giving up on people. The other thing, when I hear people very loosely, and again, these are good people, well-intentioned, but when I hear them use terms like junkie, I don't hear junkie, I hear Justin. When I hear the word prankster, I think of Chris. When I hear meth head, tweaker, drug fiend, druggie, I think of Julia and Connor and Isaac and Deborah and all these beautiful people that I know that have walked through the addiction. Some of them are still out there in it. Some of them have come through it on the other side, but we cannot generalize people and take their names away from them. We can't look at them and discount their humanity because they are in addiction. Addiction is not a disease you can catch. We know this. These are people, these are our family members, these are people that are loved. So listen to me, addiction does not define people. These are human beings, they have names, there's people worried about them. I know when I would see someone on the street, I would just sometimes have to pull over because I was recognizing that there was someone probably driving by my son at that very moment and looking at him like he was a junkie and useless. So I am not saying that everybody thinks that way, but I know that after I have gone through this journey, it has affected me in such a different way. And I just needed to share that with you. Okay. So we're going to talk about support and resources. I was flying by the seat of my pants through this. As I said, I don't know why I did this, but I did not reach out for any resources at all other than treatment centers for my son. But in retrospect, I actually did a lot of things right with my child, and I made tons of mistakes. But I'm looking back, there's three things I believe that people need. People like myself, families, loved ones of people that are in addiction. They need hope. They need an education about the drugs, and they need a plan. I don't know about you, but when I am faced with a dilemma, I want to take action. I want a plan. And so looking back, I think those three things can help someone like myself or someone struggling in this war with their family. Okay. Faith. So I told you, I shared with you that this journey with us, we were believers in the beginning, but essentially through our brokenness, the Lord does not waste our suffering. So through our brokenness, we began a relationship with Christ. I I don't know how I would have survived without it, or my son. My hope and prayer is that people that are in addiction and trying to fill something that's inside of them, an emptiness that they are trying to fill, like my son was. For Justin, he tried to fill it with drugs and alcohol. For others, maybe they're trying to fill that void with food, drugs, alcohol, pornography, whatever it is. My hope and prayer is through the brokenness, through that journey, that people find the Lord. That is my hope and prayer. It saved us. Access. So when I was at work one day, and I went to drive home, going through the motions like I always did, but I couldn't do it. I could not drive home. I felt like I was going to explode. Everything was sort of building inside of me. So I don't know why, but I turned around and I went to a church that I had visited a few times. I walked in and I asked if I could speak to someone, and I was shaking. My hands were, I was just trembling. And I think the lady on the other side of the desk recognized that I was in need. So she connected me with a young man, and this poor guy. We get into a room, and that's when all the held back tears flowed. I think I said something like, my son is an addict. He's a criminal. I think he's going to die. I don't know what to do. I just can't take this anymore. And then I just cried my eyes out. So he listened. He prayed with me. And he was smiling, and I thought at the time, this is kind of odd that this man is smiling right now. How can he smile when I'm sitting here falling apart in front of him? And that's when he told me that he was in recovery. He gave me his testimony, and he shared with me that he was a heroin addict, that he had been hospitalized and OD'd, nearly lost his life 3 or 4 times, that he lost everything. And then he went to a discipleship program in Washington. He completed the program. He found the Lord. And at this point in his life, I think he had 6 years of clean time. And here he was working in this church. And I was speechless. He gave me hope. He asked me things like, how are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing? Your son is out on the streets, and how are you managing that? He was asking me questions, and I was not prepared to answer those things, because to me it was like, wait, this is not about me. This is about my son. But he recognized that this was about me too, that I was suffering and I was walking through this with my son. It just looked different, but the pain was the same. So he became a lifeline for us. This gentleman actually ended up walking through that last part of my son's journey with us. So he encouraged me to give Justin his phone number, which I did. He gave me his phone number, and I know that's not something that is typical for people that are in case management and counseling to do, obviously, but this was in a church setting, and it was appropriate there. So he became a support for me, and a support for my son. I don't know how Justin managed this, but he called me from the street almost every day. If it wasn't every day, it was a few times a week. He would find a way to get a phone. So I was able to tell Justin about this man that I met and his testimony, and it was intriguing. Later, when Justin got help, this was kind of a game changer for Justin. He was able to talk with this man who has come out, walked the path that Justin walked, came out on the other side, and was doing well. And that spoke to Justin, so he remembered that. And when it was time for him to get help, ultimately Justin ended up going to the same program that this man had gone to. So when I left that church that day, I sat in my car, I cried, but I was hopeful. Like the darkness kind of retreated for a little bit, and I recognized, you know what? There is hope. Like maybe he's going to make it after all. So access, certainly, to people that have walked through it, people that can talk about and share with you what that's like to walk through addiction as the addict. but also to connect with people like other moms. I later was able to connect with other moms who walked in addiction, and they are my warrior sisters. I could not live without them now. If I was faced with any problems now, I would be calling on, I have probably 10 of them. But to be able to also connect with someone that's in your shoes, we all know how important that is to connect. So access to those people, I think, is absolutely imperative. And then community, we need community. We need, whether that's in your church or your neighborhood, in small groups. There's Celebrate Recovery programs throughout neighborhoods, NA, AA. You've just got to connect with someone. We should not walk through that fire alone. So to be able to connect with community in some sort. So hope is, to me, it's about faith, access, people that can instill and give you hope, and then community, people to walk with you through your suffering. Education. I keep saying this, but I am not naive, you guys. I knew about drugs, but I did not know that heroin was back. That was a shock to me. So I feel like in the beginning of this walk, if I had known about drugs, what does it look like? How much does it cost? Where do they get it? How much do they use? What does it smell like? What are the health things that are going to be happening to my child? What can I expect? What does detox look like? That kind of just the data that's related to drugs or alcohol is helpful. We have to know what we're fighting, and it is a battle. So to me, that's really, really important. Warning signs. You need to know what to look for. I'm telling you, for about a year, I thought I was going crazy. I didn't know about heroin, and I certainly didn't know that you can smoke it. So there was things that were happening in our household before I recognized what was going on. So I had money missing. I had shoes and clothes missing from my closet. It never occurred to me that my son was stealing them and selling them at a consignment shop for dope money. I had no idea you could even do that. I did not know why I was missing aluminum foil. It kept disappearing. I did not understand this terrible smell that seemed to drift through our house every time Justin was in the bathroom or taking a shower. I didn't know what those things were. So it took me, and the other thing was black smudges. So there were these black smudges throughout the house, and I am a clean freak. I like my house clean. So these smudges stood out, and I had no idea what they were. I would touch it, I would smell it, I would wipe it off, but I could not figure out what it was. So if I had known early on that these are the things that can happen in heroin use, they smoke it, they use the aluminum foil as a tray, they light it up underneath. The smell is the heroin cooking. The condensation is the black smudge marks that I'm finding throughout my house. If I had known that early on, I would have been better prepared and more equipped to just do things sooner. So to me, the warning signs, to be able to have that data, have that information, you know, the more equipped we are, the better we can manage it. And the appearance. Justin was a healthy, thriving young man, and he literally, his whole appearance changed so quickly. I remember wondering if he was actually very sick. I knew he was impaired. I knew he was on drugs. I did not know at first it was heroin, but his skin was gray. He lost weight immediately. If I had looked, his eyes, I could tell when he was high immediately, and it's because his pupils were so pinned. So again, if I had known, you know, these are the things that can happen. If your son is spiraling, he's going to lose weight. His pupils will be pinned. His skin will be almost, it was gray. Just all those things. Again, just to have someone walk through that with you, I think is helpful. And of course, the behaviors. I thought Justin was the absolute worst of the worst. And while his case and our situation was very extreme, what I learned after I went through these rehabs and would go to family meetings is our story was not much different than others. Yeah, there are folks that don't get into criminal activity or homelessness, but there's a lot that do. So the lying, the deceit, the stealing, the chaos, the strained relationships, the things that happen that that just brings that kind of chaos into your life. Not that anything would change, but knowing that, if I had known that, I don't know if I would have gotten help. Maybe. There is comfort in knowing that you're not alone. There is comfort knowing that there's others. I mean, you don't wish this on anyone and your heart aches for others, but there is comfort when you see that your child is a lot like these others, because drugs change you. It changes your behavior. So if I could have learned these things and had this education in the beginning, it certainly would have helped me do things sooner, take action sooner. I remember sleeping with my purse at night because I couldn't figure out why things were missing from it, because I never, for a while, it never occurred to me that Justin was stealing from me. So anyway, education, I think, is absolutely, absolutely important. So hope, education. And now let's talk about a plan. My favorite thing. I make plans all the time. So the idea that I'm trying to explain to you is, if you have someone that is spiraling in addiction, the more prepared you are, the better. So I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was making decisions when I was faced with them, and that obviously was gut-wrenching, and that was emotional. I made a lot of good decisions, and in looking back, again, there's things I definitely would change. But so what I am suggesting is, when there is a family that's going through this, that they establish boundaries ahead of time. So hopefully they have a community of people that are walking through this with them, whether that's friends or family members, spouses, partners, whoever that might be. But to me, to have those boundaries, so for Justin, here's what the boundaries look like. He could not come to my home, but I would meet him somewhere sometimes, occasionally. I would not ever give him money, but I might drop him off a sandwich or give him water. One of the things that was very clear to Justin is, if he was in jail, not to waste his time calling me, because I would not pick him up from jail. I would not bail him out. He asked me one time, I said no. It was really hard to say no, but I did. But all those other times he was in there, he didn't call me, because he knew that I would not pick him up. I guess the biggest boundary is, look, I love you, but I will not allow you to bring this chaos into my life. So those boundaries are absolutely important. And let me tell you, that's important for the mental health and well-being of everybody's that's involved. And then the rules in the family. I was Justin's go-to. Again, I said he was able to call me somehow. And those phone calls were important to me. I think my sister said one time for him, he should stop calling because it just turned me inside out. But the truth was, I needed to know he was still alive. I wanted him to call me, and he continued to do that. He also called his brother. But that's not for everybody. I think to identify who is the go-to person in the family, and then also in terms of with Justin, he knew the boundaries. I did not want to see him when he was on the street. I couldn't handle looking at him, but he did know when and if he was ever ready that I would be there and I would help him. So to have those roles established, I think, is really important. And options for help. When an addict is spiraling and they have come to that point where my son was, and even maybe not as bad as that, when they are ready to get help, hear me, that there is usually a window of time and you have got to move fast. So if you can do your work ahead of time, what are the options for treatment centers? Call around. What is something, do you have insurance? Is there resources, or is there no money and no insurance? All those things are fine. You just have to know what you're dealing with. Calling treatment centers, what's available? What is their wait list like? Do they need blood tests to enter that program? When Justin was ready for help, we had to put him on a plane to go to Washington, and he had no identification. So that's when God opened doors and he was able to get on the plane with no identification. But I spent that whole night trying to find something. So it's those things that you, if you can think about them ahead of time and prepare for them, when that call comes, or when you learn that your person is ready for help, then you get them in the car and you go, and you do not stop. It's a window of time when they're ready, but it's also when they're most vulnerable, especially if they are starting to get dope sick. So our routine was some of our worst times when we were traveling to different rehab centers, because there was always that last hurrah. So after I got smart, we just didn't stop anywhere. Anyway, but to do as much as you can ahead of time so that you have a plan. And for me, that would give me peace of mind. So I think that's really important. Okay. So remember when I showed you that slide when Justin, it was a mugshot, and I hate that slide so much. I love this next slide. I love it. So here we go. Woo! He's so cute. Ah. Meet my son, Justin. I'm sorry. This is my son, Justin. This is a recent picture. When Justin was finally ready to get help, I helped him. You bet I did. I was there. He went to the mission house. He went to the discipleship program in Washington, the same program that the gentleman at the church told me about. He did the hard work. He made it through. At this point, Justin is coming up on almost 5 years of being clean. And let me tell you, this is not just Justin before drugs. This is 100% transformed Justin. This is a man that has been made new in Christ. So let me kind of tell you, this is the fun part. I love talking about this. So after he graduated, he worked for the program. So he became a house manager, and he studied scripture. So he began doing teachings. He began counseling. He was working and helping and supporting men that looked just like him, men from all over the United States that had come to this program, that were broken, that were in the shackles of sin, that were struggling. And he was able to be on the other side of that, to walk and love them through their struggle. And he enjoyed that. He went out to the community. He talked to people. He raised awareness. He had a fire in his heart for telling his story and sharing his testimony. So after, if we go back a little bit, he continued to work at the program that he was in. He eventually became the associate director. But if you go back a little bit to after he graduated, he had a mess to clean up. So he had to come back to California and face the music. So the first thing he had to do is turn himself in. So this kid, this new Justin of clear mind, a man who is a godly man and is working on putting his past behind him, had to turn himself in and go into jail. And guess what? He was terrified. And I loved that he was terrified. He did not fit in anymore. He was there, like I said, for about a week. And to this day, he's like, that was a eye opener. So for him to be, every other time he had been in jail, he was impaired, he was high, he was just like everybody else in there. And with clear eyes, it was quite an experience for him. So he did his jail time. He went to court. He paid his fines. He made restitution. He got his driver's license back. He is off probation. He is building his credit. And in last June, he started his own business, construction business. It's called Ascension Renovations, and he is thriving. This young man in his business. He is now licensed, insured, and bonded. He fell in love. He does everything quick. He's still that kid, but he fell in love and quickly married the love of his life. They also got pregnant very quickly, and they had a daughter. Her name is Everly Grace. I am madly in love with her. She is an absolute angel. She'll be 2 in June, and they are expecting another child, a son, in May. Justin is a changed man. We were always close. We were close throughout his whole journey in addiction, even though there was this intensity, and it was really a love-hate thing between me and him. We are good friends. We talk daily. He shares his wisdom. He inspires me. He's a good husband. And I live every day knowing that I almost lost him. And Justin also is very grounded in his faith. He's also very aware of how he needs to live his life. So his community, he lives in Washington. He didn't come back, only to visit. But he's surrounded by people, and his community are people that support him, that lift him up, that make him better, that hold him accountable. So he doesn't minimize his past and feel like he's got it all figured out. No. It's work every single day, but his strength and his support comes from the Lord, and that is accessible to him all the time. So he is doing the hard work every single day to continue living the life that he's living right now. So Justin is a changed man. I am changed. We are both. Dylan is changed. My whole family has changed. We are better. We are stronger because of the things we went through. And of course, there's trauma. Of course, sometimes the past comes back. I definitely have triggers, and I work through all those things. But mostly, we came out on the other side of this as better people. So my hope for those of you that are involved with people in addiction, whether that's personally or professionally, my hope and prayer is that you remember our story and that it helps you help others. By all accounts, my son should be dead. There is no logical reason that Justin survived this. But he did survive, and I recognize that many don't. There's many young people and older people that we have buried, where hearts are shattered and they're grieving the loss of their brothers and sisters and daughters. And I rejoice in the fact that my son came out of this. But that's why I said yes to this webinar. That's why it's emotional for me. That's why you might be sensing the intensity, because it's the first time I have talked about our journey in this kind of setting. Because we have to do better. The community has to do better. And you guys are in a position to do that. Listen, this thing started with the opiates that were available, that were plentiful and easy to get their hands on. So we went from that, and then we got into heroin. And now we're dealing with fentanyl. We are dealing with a drug that is so strong that first-time users are dying. So we've got to do something. I hope in hearing this that you have a fire in your belly. I'm rooting for you guys. I have so much respect for the work that you are doing, and I just want you to keep going. It's going to take a lot for us to turn things around. It's going to take a lot of things to change, for us to love people through their pain and struggle, and I just applaud you, and I thank you. Whew. Next slide. So a couple things. Do I still have a little bit of time? I think I do.
Just yes, keep going.
Okay. So a few more things that I want to say before we wrap up. My email is there. It's katherineinmanfaith@gmail.com. Carrie had mentioned that this new passion job that I have is as an author. And when I came to this island, I wrote a book about our journey. I have never written before. It's sort of poured out of me, and both my sons helped me write that book. Right now it is in the process. I'm looking for a publisher. It's been edited, and so we're ready to go. I'm hoping, my prayer is that it's on the shelf within a year or so. If you want to follow that journey, or if you're interested in reading that book, I'm on all social media platforms. But more importantly than that, if you have questions, if you would like to talk with me, I don't know if there's anything I can do to support or help you. And honestly, friends, if you are struggling or know someone is, and I can just pray for you, prayer is powerful. And so please, if you're interested and want to connect, that's my email. That's the best way to do it. And I think that is it, other than just, I already feel blessed by having experienced this with you. So thank you. Again, this was the first time for me. So I hope that you could hear me. I hope it was clear. I hope it was valuable. But I just thank you so much, and blessings to all of you. Okay, Carrie, it's all you.
Katherine, will you, instead of bringing it back to my slides, will you go back to your slide of Justin, because that's what I want people to see as we're signing off. And we're getting, we're getting, there you go. That's the slide. I want to remind everybody that we are recording this, and Alma will be sending you a link, I think within the day or by Monday, a link to our Strategies 2.0 YouTube channel, so that you can see this webinar again, that you can share this webinar in staff meetings, whatever it is you want to do to use this story. You've been getting some beautiful, beautiful comments from people about thanking you for sharing your story with them. Some that have had very personal experiences. One has a question about any pain management alternative programs or workshops for those that have been dealing with chronic pain and have been given the opioids to help them with their pain, want to be off the opioids. I'm going to suggest that this person email you directly and have a personal conversation with you about that. So I don't know about the rest of you, but there were a couple times where I was in tears as I was hearing the story of Katherine, and it's a beautiful story of pain and a journey, and then that success, which is why I want to see Justin's face right in front of me as we are ending this webinar today. So please go into our Strategies YouTube, Strategies 2.0. Alma will send you the link for that. Check out other strategies, webinars that we have. You will also be receiving an evaluation that should immediately come up when you sign out. So we encourage you to complete that evaluation. Troy, let me unmute you really, really quick. I just want to give just such a big thank you to Troy and it's not letting me unmute you, Troy, for some reason. To Troy and to Katherine. Oh, there you are. To Troy and to Katherine, thank you so much for your knowledge, for your information. Just an incredible webinar today. I just cannot thank you enough.
Thank you.
Any last thoughts?
I just am happy I survived that. I was so nervous, but I'm just, again, so blessed and so just honored for the opportunity. So I just thank you so much. Thank you.
We thank you.
Definitely.
Okay.
Just to remind folks, if they touch the Opioid Toolkit, if they could take our evaluation. I was moved in our practice, Katherine, and I'm further moved to action. I like being moved mentally, but I'm much more like being moved to action. Not sure organically where we're going to go, but we're going somewhere, and I truly appreciate you.
I am down.
Yes, I feel the same way. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off from this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Please have a great weekend. Hold your family close and tight. Tell them that you love them. Take care of each other. And with that, thank you again for joining us today.
Definitely.